Meanwhile, the 2020 elections are happening. Joe Biden is up in New Hampshire. And it's interesting. In this office, there has been a slight role reversal. Whereas I, for an extended period of time, of course, have been on my blame the voters bailiwick for several years now. There are others in this office who have been on the other side of that. And now it feels a little bit like things have reversed.
I think I've charted a third way the whole time between your complete discrediting of the people and Jamie's blind faith in them.
What has yours been?
It's that I both respect and disrespect the electorate simultaneously in a way that synthesizes the contradictions in a way that's convenient depending on the argument I'm making at a particular time.
Dialectics, Bill.
I will say that you have mastered that ability.
It's an ability called synthesis. You're too blindly ideologically committed to your resentments and emotional agita and Jamie's utopian visions. Ask me today, is there a poll that's bad for Bernie? The electorate's looking very bad. However, I have confidence in them in the long term.
Well, I mean,
potentially.
That is what I've been saying about Joe Biden. My confidence in the electorate is rather limited. However, I do think, and look, I'm not even saying this from an ideological perspective. I mean, I feel like I have a decent understanding of partisan Democrats. And I just think that those partisan Democrats have a little more savvy than they used to, and have a little less patience than they used to, a little less desire for compromise. I don't know that the West Wing could succeed today in today's environment, the TV show. But here is Joe Biden saying something that I think many of you will find, in some ways, incredibly stunning, because you are all aware of what has taken place over the past 3 years. And you are aware of what took place in the 8 years during the Obama-Biden administration, and also are aware of what happened from 2000 to 2008 during the George W. Bush administration, and so on and so on. This is such a shocking thing to hear. We will talk about the potential explanations for this, which range from medical conditions to deep cynicism. But here is Joe Biden at a place apparently that serves yogurt in New Hampshire, by a yogurt sign, answering a question, suggesting that all you need to do is get rid of Donald Trump, and then magic happens, and Republicans turn okay. Here he is.
He's like the Night King.
I just think there is a way, and the thing will fundamentally change things, is with Donald Trump out of the White House. Not a joke. You will see an epiphany occur among many of my Republican friends. And it's already beginning this year in the House now. You've seen people that, in fact, were not willing to vote for any Democratic initiative, even if they agreed with it, because they didn't want to be the odd person out if it wasn't going to pass. There's no sense in getting politically beaten for something that's not going to happen. Let me put it another way. If we can't change it, we're in trouble. This nation cannot function without generating consensus.
Okay, so there's two parts to this. The first part is Joe Biden claims that the Republicans are going to have an epiphany if Donald Trump gets out of office. If this sounds remarkably similar to the idea, let's say, that their fever will break, that makes sense, because that's exactly what Obama said about the Republican fever breaking He said this back in 2012, right before his reelection. He argued, my expectation is if we can break this fever, we can invest in clean energy and energy and efficiency because it's not a partisan issue. He says that if he expects the gridlock to end after the election, if he can win the election, because then that after the election, now it turns out that the goal of beating Obama doesn't make much sense because I'm not running again. We can start getting some cooperation again. Now, maybe Joe Biden was asleep during those years, or as Paul Waldman writes in the Washington Post, maybe there's some type of blow to the head that took place. In fact, he writes, if Biden thinks it is, he says, though this is something all of us would like to believe is true, it just isn't. And if Biden thinks it is, we should check to see if he recently suffered some kind of blow to the head. And then he goes on to say, it's possible, of course, that Biden doesn't actually think that Republicans will be joining him in a spirit of openness and compromise. He may know what the reality is, but also believe that it's worthwhile to at least pretend some other future might be possible. And Waldman goes on to say, the only problem with that is there's no evidence. There's much to be gained from being seen as reasonable and moderate. Voters don't reward you for it. It doesn't get you any closer to achieving your policy goals. So what's the point? So either we have someone who is deluded or just posing in a really, really unhelpful way. Because I actually think it's not just what's the point. There's great detriment here. Because if Joe Biden is setting up this basically built-in excuse for the Republicans and why they are following Donald Trump in lockstep, how do you explain what happened in Alabama yesterday? How do you explain what Mitch McConnell has been doing for years? How do you explain the empty seat? How do you explain Mitch McConnell going on and saying, the best part of my career was looking Barack Obama in the eye and saying, you will not get that empty Supreme Court seat. This is really stunning, and it is my contention that the Democratic primary voters, this may have worked 10 years ago, but I just don't, I find it very, very hard to believe that this is going to work with people today. How much delusion do you need about the Republican Party? And if he does believe this, like I say, if he doesn't believe it, he's just piss poor at trying to set up a political context in which he can get anything done. Right? Because, I mean, if you're just saying Republicans are fundamentally reasonable, they're just under the throes, the hypnosis of Donald Trump. And this is your political strategy. What happens when they say no to you as president? When you have already basically given them the imprimatur of being reasonable? Well, then I guess it's reasonable to deny you any Supreme Court picks. I guess it's reasonable to deny you any to sign off on your hearings for to staff your administration. I guess it's reasonable to not allow you to have any federal court picks. I mean, this is what he's doing is extremely dangerous. And that's assuming he thinks he knows what he's doing. He may also just believe this stuff. He may be so insulated from what's going on that he believes this stuff, which is even scarier. But I will remind you that when Barack Obama made that deal that extended the Bush tax cuts, when they capitulated to the Republicans, when they did not need to do any of it, You all remember the fiscal cliff. Well, there was no fiscal cliff. Those Bush tax cuts did not need to be negotiated because they had a sunset provision. They were going to go away on their own. And there was one person in the government who understood that, and it was Harry Reid, which is why he was so angry when Joe Biden essentially slid back into the Senate and made a side deal with Mitch McConnell to say, we're going to give you some of you keep the Bush tax cuts, and we will get what we would get anyways. Joe Biden, and you can see it in the second part of what he says, which is, if we can't do this, the country is in real trouble. Well, we haven't been doing it for years and years. There's a reason why Barack Obama, the best things that he did and the things that were so easily unwound were because they were all by executive action. And the reason why they were all by executive action is because we're already there. We've been there. So the question is, how do you respond to it? Do you continue to go back to the Republicans and expect them to be moderate when they haven't been and they have been successful in not being so? Or do you make them pay a price? And he is basically saying there's no price to be paid. I understand you just were under the hypnosis of Donald Trump. I mean, this is just absurd, and it is dangerous. And it is particularly dangerous at a time now where that judiciary, all of that scheming by Mitch McConnell has paid off. And Joe Biden is just basically saying, you're going to get a free pass, a free political pass. And what's going to happen is, if he becomes president, they're going to take that pass and they're going to slam him over the head with it. He's going to find out it's a club. Really stupid. And frankly, I think Democratic voters are just going to be like, what Republican Party are you talking about? This is something that makes Joe Biden look incredibly out of touch.
Delusional.
Yeah, I hope that you're right. I mean, it is a nice bedtime story, right? Like, Trump is the Night King, and as soon as you kill him, his army of ghouls is just going to fall on the ground and play dead.
Exactly.
We'll see. I mean, we'll see if people are dumb enough to buy it. I feel like I have to defend myself for a second, though. I did not say that I do blame the electorate. I said if I were the type of person to blame the electorate,
it sounds like you're learning.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, I would say that if you vote for Joe Biden in the 2020 primary, you deserve President Andrew Dice Clay in 2024.
There you go.